Yaqeen, it's been 2 years since we spoke last, and I'm extremely happy that we are here again.
What a pleasure after all these years. It's been a couple of years, and being back on this podcast of you is an absolute delight.
I usually start my interviews with an icebreaker question, and this is something I learned from Tim Ferriss actually. So I want to ask you, what purchase of $100 or less that you made recently has made your life easier?
Wow. I would have to think on that one. $100 or less. I think I did some winter shopping. I bought some coats and some jackets to protect me. And I think that has made my life significantly easier because now they are just lightweight clothes. And while I get the heat from the down feather, which I'm supposed to, so I think that really has lately, I say it's one of those small, finer things that has increased the quality of my life.
Right. And for me, that has really helped me a lot. It's buying YouTube premium subscription.
Oh, really?
And as you know, we share the same account as
Absolutely,
well.
we do.
So YouTube Premium has really made my life very easy.
Same here. I can never go back to normal YouTube with all those ads because look, we don't want to upfront pay for things. I can understand that. But time is also currency. It saves us a lot of time. It saves us a lot of distraction. So it's essential to invest in things like that. Not that I'm doing a promotion for YouTube, but the idea is every time that we save, we can use it for doing whatever it is that we love doing.
Exactly. And these are small things, but they save a lot of time and they make, your digital life experience much easier.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
And time is something we don't value enough. I think a lot of people don't emphasize time management enough. And interestingly, in our religion of Islam, time is something that Allah is going to ask you about. Like, where did you spend your time, which includes your life, your youth. So just like we'll have to be accountable for our deeds, for how we earned and how we spend our money, we're also accountable how we spend our time, because ultimately it's time which makes life. So I think that's an interesting thing to remember.
And right now, in these times, in this day and age, we are seeing that people are extremely careless with their time,
Right.
and people don't really value, their time anymore. And so, what do you think is the reason behind this, sort of a pandemic we have, in a
Right.
sense?
I mean, I have often seen youngsters when I was younger in my bachelor's days as well.
You're still young, don't worry.
I am, but you just see somebody like a group of youngsters, and you ask those lads, like, what are you up to? I'm just killing time. You can't kill time, but time will ultimately kill you. The day we are born, we're ultimately dying as well. So it's a blessing, and one of the ways that we show gratitude towards time or towards our life is the idea that we use it very well. And that is always what I tell young people in Kashmir or at university that I sometimes teach, is the idea that time is precious, time is life, and time management is life management. So if you want to get your life together, start with a routine, start with the smaller things of life. And if you get that right, trust me, you will get your life right.
The issue we also face right now, along with people wasting so much of their time, is people these days don't have focus.
Right.
People really lack focus. They can't focus on the same task for even 30 minutes anymore.
Yeah.
And given the kind of culture that these social media brands have made, for example, these small clips and like sound
Right.
bites and takes, people can't even focus anymore, like
Yeah,
before.
consuming content into
Yeah.
those smaller clips or shorts.
Right, because the reason is people have lost their attention span, and it's been going down and down over the last many
Right,
years.
right.
So, for example, before it was like 1 minute, now then it became 30 seconds. Now it's like less than 15 seconds.
Yeah.
You have less than 15 seconds to catch a person's attention online. So why do you think that's happening?
I think one of the bigger causes, if we look at it, and when I look at it as a clinician as well as a clinical psychologist or a therapist, is the idea that the new generation or the newer generation, I would say that people want instant gratification. We want things and we really want them fast. We want fast food. We want to consume content and it has to be fast. We want information that is fast. We don't sit down and do serious sort of the homework. So if you want to do deep work, you want to excel at anything, you want to become an academic, a scholar, a programmer, a writer, all of these things need dedicated time. So without proper time and time management, it just would not happen. So I do think that this idea that everything is happening really fast, right? And this is also what Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said that towards the end times, time will pass very fast. So this is exactly what it means. It's actually a metaphor that people would want, like travel will become faster, things will become faster, and people would want things to be extremely fast. And you see this in our parents' generation as well. They have much more patience because things at their time, it really took time. So what I would say is that find a passion, find a purpose really, and stop just this mad race of consuming content which is based on an algorithm. And one of the things that I think also, it's about the focus part that we talked about in the young people, but also this idea of comparison. Because of social media, everybody compares themselves with everybody else. They don't know their lives deep down just because people share their selfies and pictures of the food, the travels that they make. So this level of narcissism, in a way that I have to put all my life online so that it's open to other people's scrutiny and comments, and creating that false image, I think that is really affecting the young people. And this is one of the reasons as well that young people feel more anxious, because now they just don't compare themselves to the culture they come from, but to a global level, which is good in a way if you do it in a positive manner, in the way that what you want to do and how other people are doing this. But more often than not, this happens in a context where what ends up happening is you're comparing your weight with others, your looks with others, your height with others, your fashion with others. So because of that rat race in which you are always on a pedestal where you have to compare yourself with everybody else, I do think that's why we are losing focus, because we are not focusing on our priorities. So deep work and the idea of doing something good and creative is not actually using the social media platforms, but it's actually creating something beautiful, something meaningful out of your life.
Right. So how do you think we can be more responsible while using social media and not let all this hype affect us?
Absolutely. I do think that when it comes to social media, it is made in a way that it reinforces the ideas in our mind that one reel after another, one content after another. The algorithms are made like that. So what can be done is you hold yourself accountable that how much time do you really want to spend on the social media, and exactly why. I do spend fair amount of time I do spend on social media, but why? To create content, to see the reactions, reply to people, and to reach an audience with a message that ultimately creates value. So I talk about lifestyle, mental health, because I'm a clinician at the end of the day. And I talk about things that might empower our young people, and so that they do things that they love doing. So I do think this sense of responsibility has to be intrinsic. Nobody else can force you to do something. So ask yourself, what is the bigger picture here? Am I just, you know, uh, consumer at the end of the day, consumer of content, or am I somebody who can actually make a difference to myself and to a greater world?
You're also a famous mental health online creator, and you make content in Kashmiri language.
Yes.
So what made you decide that that's something you want to do?
I think we were in that meeting together when we came up with this idea that we have a lot of content in Kashmir which is meaningless. I don't find it adding any value. I mean, comedy can add value to you, entertainment adds value, information adds value. I can understand. But every single content creator in Kashmir, when I saw, people are consuming this content, and ultimately it just adds nothing to your life. There was one of the guys, he wrote this book in the 80s. It's called Amusing Yourself to
To
Death,
that.
right?
Yeah.
So this was about television. I think if the guy was alive today and if he's seeing all this, what is happening, the guy would be like, wow, that was just television.
He
Look
would
at
shoot
the
himself probably.
exactly. Look at the madness that
Right.
we have run ourselves into, right? So I do think that more responsibility and accountability has to be there.
So going back to the question which I asked you is about mental health in Kashmir.
Kashmir, yeah.
What do you think is the current state of mental health in Kashmir, and what can we do to improve that state?
Right. I think at a community level, because we are in Kashmir, we're a collectivistic culture. We are a faith-based Muslim community. So that is an intrinsic part of our values. So that needs to be taken into consideration. And I think most of the work with regard to mental health in Kashmir has to be about awareness more than interventions. Why? Because people don't even know what really mental health is. So that's why we started creating content in Kashmiri language so that more people have access to the basic ideas like, what is mental health? How do we maintain a good mental health? So I do think the status of mental health in the whole subcontinent, Kashmir especially because of the conflict, it is bad. A lot of people need mental health services, they're not able to access it. Reason is we have a dearth of mental health professionals, be it psychiatrists, clinical psychologists, counselors. There's a dearth of people. And also there are a lot of people who really need to access these services. So what I thought is, how do we reach? Because therapy is not something that you can scale. Even if I'm doing or I was doing full-time therapy, you can see 20, 25 people in your whole practice. But I wanted to reach hundreds and thousands of people who immediately need this help. So how do you fill this gap? You at least create awareness about mental health. So people did not even know what psychotherapy is when I started. And people were like, why don't you use terms like counseling? Why psychotherapy? But my idea was to add value to people's lives and create awareness. But at least now when I use the word therapy, and I'm pretty well known in the mental health field in Kashmir, people do understand what I'm talking about. So I do think with time, change can happen. And I do see a lot of depression, anxiety, OCD among Kashmiri patients and clients. And unless we address it, address the stigma, and make this topic mainstream, just like we talk about lifestyle or health, until then, I would think that more work is needed till it becomes mainstream.
Right. Could you talk to me about traditional Islamically integrated psychotherapy and how do you integrate this in your practice? Because, I think there's a lot of stigma attached with regards to mental health in the Muslim communities. So could you explain more about it?
Right. That's a wonderful question. I mean, despite Islam emphasizing the idea of equality and brotherhood and no racism, racism is deeply rooted into Muslim communities. We can't deny the fact. And why is this relevant? This idea of equality, when it's not there, it leads to discrimination, but it also leads to poorer outcomes when it comes to mental health. So in Islam, there is no stigma attached to if you are somebody different. There is no stigma attached to if you have mental health issues. There is no stigma attached to if you belong to a different race or a different color or a different country. But unfortunately, that does happen in the Muslim world because there is a difference in the values and teachings of Islam and what is happening in the Muslim societies. Point being, mental health is very much stigmatized in the South Asian culture as a whole, in the Muslim cultures.
I think not just Southeast Asia, it's throughout the Muslim world we see this. Like, for example, if somebody is mentally sick, the first thing they would say is your iman is weak, or they will say
There you go.
you're possessed by a jinn.
Absolutely. Or you should pray enough
Yeah.
so that you wouldn't have mental health problems. Because the characterization in the minds of the people in the Muslim world is that mental health conditions happen because of lack of faith, which cannot be far from the truth. Islam is a religion with very wide principles. And among those principles is the protection of life, which includes actually the protection of mental health. And the first psychiatric hospital, it was actually made by Muslims. Al-Balkhi was the first person in the Muslim world who actually was the person who classified depression into various different types. So Muslims have a huge legacy when
That's
it comes
amazing.
to.
And could you like how long ago was that? The one you talked about, Al-Balkhi, and
I can't remember the exactly date, but it's hundreds of years
Wow.
ago. In the times of Abbasids, when I talk about the hospital that we are talking about, the first one, right, which was mental health psychiatric out patient, actually inpatient, where people were admitted and stuff, and they were taught to be improving their mental health while they are in that facility. So it was in Baghdad during the period of the Abbasids. In fact, even in the time of Ottomans, if we talk about Turkey, not very far from where in Istanbul right now, not far from here in Edirne, in the times of Ottomans, they did actually have facilities for mental health. And you can still visit the museum where they will talk about, for example, waves, water waves, the sound that it creates, how therapeutic it is. So those natural sort of interventions. But I do think in the Muslim world we have always prioritized mental health. And interestingly, when we look at the societies now, we just narrow down mental health conditions, which is extremely serious, to just lack of faith.
Yaqeen, as you mentioned, Muslim societies have always taken mental health very seriously. And but right now that's not the case. We see there's a huge disconnect. So why do you think that happened?
Right. I do think it's after 1258 with the invasion of Mongols. If we look at it historically, so the Muslims started deteriorating. But then we do have some comebacks in, if we talk about Ottomans, for example, and then there is the colonial legacy. Because somehow to me mental health was not a priority, because we in the Muslim world were struggling with things which we thought were much bigger, because our land was being invaded, our faith was in crisis, in danger, and we had to protect the already existing knowledge that we had, right? So I think that could have been one of the probable historical reasons. And in the modern world, I do think the characterization of Islam has been narrowed down just to some people about penal codes, some just about judicial codes. But more than that, Islam, I believe, is a way of life. So I think there is some problem in the characterization of religion as a whole. So I think that's where something went wrong. That's where we started disconnecting religion from different aspects of life, which does include our psychological life and our mental health. Because when we are in our sound mental health, which is the protection of our aql, which is hifz al-aql, which is one of the parts of maqasid al-sharia that we call, that Imam Ghazali or Imam Shatibi talks about. And why this is important? It's important because, for example, when alcohol is prohibited in Islam, and the reason for that is because it's believed, based on maqasid the sharia, that it puts a barrier on your brain, that you're not able to see things for what they are, right? So protection of aql, or the mind, is a priority, and it's one of the aims that sharia actually wants, or the Islamic law actually wants. And mental health is a huge part of that. So that's why I think we need to go back to those roots and that legacy, and see what the early Muslim scholars, you talked about traditionally Islamic oriented psychotherapy. And one of the ideas is that the modern Western psychology does not recognize the concept of a soul. It's a Western secular psychology. But while as Muslims, we do believe that human beings have a soul, and that has to be addressed if we are talking about mental health. So traditionally, we had a sheikh, right? So it was more like a mentor or a spiritual mentor. And then you have hakim or tabib, which is a clinician. So the role of a TIIP therapist, traditionally Islamically oriented psychotherapist, would be somewhat relating to both of these. So there would be parts where it would include spiritual mentoring, or creating interventions which are based on Quran and Hadith and the values of the clients, while a part of it would deal with the psychopathologies and the clinical part of it. But I think both do have to be present in order for the healing to be more holistic from the values that a vast majority of Muslims, more than 1 billion people, believe in.
And could you give me examples of some of the interventions that you use in Islamically integrated psychotherapy?
No, absolutely. One of the things that we use, for example, is tafakkur, which is that you think about, you contemplate. And contemplation is a part of what we call as mindfulness in nowadays. And we tell people to contemplate, think about your life, what you're doing, do that homework about your life. I always emphasize that. And our religion has always told us this, right? Self accountability, taking responsibility for your actions. And this is something really essential. So tafakkur is one of the interventions that we use. There can be many others. For example, one of the interventions that is that the 99 names of Allah, you just show it to the client and tell them, pick up the 3 which ones are your favorite, and what does it mean to you. So that can open an emotional manner and show us the need for example, if a person chooses al-wadud, which is Allah being the loving one, so we will talk about the need for love, because emotions are followed by needs. And maybe this need is not being met in the person's life, for instance, or the person might talk about what is it that they need at this point of time. So there are types of, or even in CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, there are many of the interventions which are very cognitive in nature. And Interestingly, in the Islamic perspective, we do believe in the concept of the heart. We have the qalb and we have the mind, right? There is that dichotomy in Islam, and we do believe that heart is the center of the soul, just like brain is the center of the body, right? While there is that, but we do believe that heart does actions of worship as well. Yeah, not thinking bad about somebody, husn zan, it's a cognitive intervention, right? When you have good perspective about others, you have that cleanliness of mind when it comes to other people. You're only concerned with what is good for you rather than meddling yourself unnecessarily into the affairs of the others. Things like that, which are at a cognitive level. Even at a behavioral level, you have things like zikr, you have things like prayer, which can be protective factors that can be integrated in the treatment plan of the patient, so that the outcomes are aligned and the healing is aligned with the values of the one that we are healing.
Yaqeen, you also work as a corporate psychologist and you help businesses and employees improve their performance.
Yeah,
How,
that's another
yeah,
manifestation of mine.
right. So how exactly do you do that?
Well, since I was very young, or since I did my bachelor's days, I joined the debate club in Malaysia to improve my communication skills. And then while I was training to become a therapist, I did realize certain things about human nature, certain things about effective communication or negotiation. And I was always interested in the corporate part of the things, because I do believe that one of the empowerments that can really come is an economic empowerment, is the empowerment that comes when you're financially independent. And having this sort of the mindset, because therapy is something which you cannot scale, because you have limited number of days. You just have 24 hours a day. No matter how much therapy you do with your clients, it's not a scalable profession. But I do think if you want to become financially independent, and this is what I'm telling to all the viewers or those who are listening to the podcast, is if you want to be financially independent, one of the things that you have to do, apart from having multiple streams of income, is to do something which is scalable. And one of the things which I thought I could scale is developing certain courses for corporate houses, because I met a lot of people while I was attending some training programs, met a lot of CEOs and others, and I just realized that they're just some nice, cool bunch of people who are just as human as any of us,
They are no
right?
superheroes,
Oh,
as
absolutely.
we sometimes imagine them to be.
Yeah, the projected image, but when you meet them, they're just people who just want to do things and who just saw a problem and they just want to create a change. But when it comes to organizations, right, mental health always has to be a priority. Why? Because if your employees are not happy and they're not mentally healthy, that will cost you a lot as a business. So that's sort of a thing we try to make organizations, those who have not realized this, realize them that mental health will ultimately cost you a lot. So what do we do about it? There is a concept that we call as EAP, employee assistance programs. So we do some programs of general awareness about mental health. So for example, mental health in the corporate workspace. So, how do you know somebody who's sitting next to you in the cubicle or whatever office that you're into might be showing some signs of mental health condition? We train the managers in this as well to look after their folk. So, it does improve the well-being, because we do a lot of programs about well-being as well, and I do emphasize spirituality in the workplace. And spirituality is not just you are a monk or you go to the Himalayas and find it there. It is about the concept of transcendence, that you believe in something bigger than you exist, and you can very well be meditating right on your chair or on this chair that I'm on it right now. It's just trying to empty your mind from all the distractions. It can be as simple as that, because these big terms, when they're thrown around, right, like meditation and you have this concept of holistic living, they sound really heavy. But then if we break them down, they're just simple things. And that's what ultimately I try to do, simplify things. And how do we make people happy with good quality of life and well-being? So I think that is my value proposition when it comes to companies, and that's the sort of the programs and workshops that I do.
There is something we see very often is toxic work culture.
Right.
And how do you deal with such a situation where the work culture has become extremely toxic,
Right.
and people are just really unhappy in the workplace? How do you fix this?
Because the competition is cutthroat, right? It's actually true, a lot of the environments are really toxic, and that's because people are toxic. And people, they take the problems of their life and they take their own personality and they will bring it to every aspect of life, and work being one of them, right? So it's not that people who are toxic, they have this toxicity specific to a workplace. I think it's generally how certain people are. And people have what we also call in the Muslim tradition as diseases of the heart. They have envy, jealousy, there is competition, and you always want to outperform the other person, especially in the corporate setup. Now, the idea is for those who are doing it because of their narcissism, because they want to harm other people. That's how they are. But then on the other side, we have the victims of this toxic culture. So we do interventions, for example, when we do corporate training programs, we do things like assertiveness training, and this is something which is essentially a part of psychotherapy as well. That clients, after we talk about the interventions about depression and anxiety, what we do a lot is assertiveness training. So assertiveness is, for example, how do you know and claim your rights without offending somebody else or without impeding the rights about other people. A simple example of that can be, a lot of people find it very difficult to say no to others, right? So how do you develop this skill that and save a lot of your time and energy by saying no to other people? So developing those assertiveness skills, or for example, if your boss is toxic and coming to you, you're working on something, let's say, and the boss tells, okay, do this presentation, this and that on top of your own work. So you will be overwhelmed. You will be a victim of toxic culture or overworking or close to the burnout. But if you're assertive and you use assertiveness techniques as a part of this, what would you do? You'll tell your boss, for example, okay, that's sounds good. But you know what? I'm actually working on this presentation, this work, and I'm working on this report. So while I adjust whatever have you just told me, what do you think, where should I place these on the level of the priority? So the person will be like, more often than not, okay, so it seems that you have a lot on your plate, let me find something else for this work. So this is assertiveness. So there are those responses that we train different workplaces in, so that what we call as toxicity doesn't remain, while the same energy is used for driving innovation, which ultimately drives profits.
Yaqeen, just to wrap the whole podcast up right now, what would be your advice to young people?
Well, I do speak a lot to the young people in different programs, and every time it really makes me glad. And every time the message that I have for young people is that work on your dreams, but make your goals properly. Goals that lead to your um, financial independence, because that's very essential, especially if you're a man.
Yeah,
It's
because a
important.
man is only valued if he makes money.
Oh, absolutely. Only dogs, children, and women are appreciated, anyways. But for a man, the hard reality is, unless you perform, you don't have that intrinsic value. I do agree with that. Um, so, my advice is empower yourself. It doesn't give anything if you're just complaining, right? So, try your best, work hard, stop complaining, and start taking responsibility, because the concept of responsibility and accountability is very close to me, and this is very essential. If you're somebody who just keeps on complaining, you wouldn't get much done out of your life. While as if you're somebody who takes responsibility and always works on how to improve the game and overall your life, you would definitely be out there and achieve your dreams and be successful, because you're not a complainer. You're hustling, you're doing your best in life, and you are trying to do what is the right thing, not just what suits your whims and fancies. Because
Right.
life is about doing the right thing.
But how do young people figure out what the right thing to do is? That's a very tricky thing to
Absolutely. I
figure
think
out.
exactly. It comes back to the purpose of it comes back to the question of the purpose. And I do think a lot of the people are lost, young people, because they have lost meaning and purpose. And purpose is actually something that drives you. It's like an anchor. No matter how much you deviate from it, you might have hardships and setbacks in life, but then it is like an anchor which brings you back to it. And that's why you try a lot of different things. Ralph Waldo Emerson, he said that life is, um, like an experiment. The more you try, the more you will know about it. So have a lot of different life experiences. I started with volunteering for so many different causes. I started doing a lot of different things way out of my league, just to push my limits, until I found a niche area where I find comfortable, because I always wanted to add some value to people's lives. Then I asked myself, how do I exactly do that? So I found my own niche. So I would ask young people, volunteer, travel a lot, learn a new language, push your limits, learn new skills until you know what you are comfortable with. And once you find that zone for yourself, that purpose, life becomes much better, because you wouldn't have to motivate yourself or to read those motivational books like how do I feel motivated and how do I do this and that, because it's your purpose which is your intrinsic driving factor, force and motivation, which will make you wake up every day and to follow your thing. Often it's said, and I say it, that dreams are not just things you see while you're asleep. Dreams are things which don't let you sleep, because you just have that sense of purpose. You wake up in the morning and this is a new, fresh day where you want to pursue your goals and your purpose. And that, I think, is very essential. Trying different things, then finding what works for you. It's important.
Yaqeen, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much.
Oh, absolutely. The pleasure was all mine. Thank you so much.